I used to think my life was the picture of stability. If you had driven through our neighborhood in North Dallas, you'd have seen the neat lawns, the American flags hanging from porches, the kids riding bikes down cul-de-sacs. My house looked no different. Brick front, trimmed hedges, a grill on the back patio where the smell of hickory smoke drifted every Sunday evening. I had a wife I thought I knew, a brother I'd trusted since boyhood, and a family that gathered together so often we joked we should just buy a ranch and all move in. My wife Emily was the kind of woman who made everything look effortless. She'd show up to our friends' kids' birthday parties with a cake she baked from scratch, not the store-bought kind, and people would ask how she managed it with work, errands, and helping my parents. She had this way of making me feel like she was always on top of things, organized, thoughtful, grounded. And my brother Jason, he was the joker of the family. Younger by 2 years, he'd always been the wild one when we were kids. The guy who would cannonball into the pool at Thanksgiving or sneak extra brisket slices before dinner. But as adults, he had mellowed out, or so I thought. He worked in construction, had his own pickup business, and though he'd never really settled down, he was always welcome in our house. We were tight. That's what made what came later so brutal. Looking back, the cracks started showing in subtle ways, quiet shifts that you only recognize in hindsight. Emily began guarding her phone like it was a lifeline. She used to leave it on the kitchen counter, buzzing with texts from her coworkers about projects or her sister about shopping plans. But one day I noticed it was glued to her side. She'd take it into the bathroom, into the laundry room, even to the back yard if she was just checking the mail. I'd joke, "What, are you waiting for the president to call you?" And she'd laugh too loud, brush me off, and change the subject. Jason, too, started showing up at odd times. At first it was innocent. He'd stop by to borrow my socket wrench or ask if I had extra gas for his mower. But then it became a pattern. He'd swing by when I wasn't home, leaving behind comments like, "Yeah, Emily let me in," or "She helped me with something." I didn't think much of it at first. After all, she was my wife, he was my brother. What could possibly be wrong with them talking? But then there were the late nights. Emily began running errands at strange hours, milk runs at 9:30 p.m., grocery trips after the kids were in bed, drives to pick up something from Target that took an hour longer than they should have. When I asked, she'd snap back with irritation. "What, you don't trust me to buy paper towels?" I told myself I was paranoid. That's the thing about suspicion. It creeps in like a draft through a cracked window, cold but easy to ignore until it becomes unbearable. One evening, I remember sitting in the stands at my daughter's softball game. The Texas sun was dropping low, painting everything orange, and the parents were cheering like we were at the World Series. Emily wasn't there. She had said she had to help her coworker with a report. Jason showed up, though, sat right next to me, beer in hand, and cheered for his niece. Something about the way he asked, "Where's Emily tonight?" made my skin crawl. His tone was casual, but his eyes flickered just enough for me to notice. I pushed it down. That's what you do when the truth threatens the foundation you've built your life on. You push it down and pray it's nothing. The first real sign came on a Friday night. We were grilling in the backyard, just the two of us, sipping Shiner Bock as the steaks sizzled. Emily's phone buzzed on the patio table. She stepped inside to grab more seasoning, and I glanced down. One word lit up the screen. "Can't wait." No name, just the phrase. She came back, saw me looking, and snatched the phone so fast it nearly toppled her drink. She forced a smile. "It's just my coworker, inside joke." Then she changed the subject to our weekend plans like nothing happened. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles and wondered if I was losing my mind. Jason, meanwhile, had started hanging around more. He'd crack jokes with Emily that seemed just a little too personal. One Saturday, while we were cleaning the garage, I walked in on the two of them laughing about some secret story. They stopped when I entered. "Inside joke," Jason said, echoing her words from the week before. My stomach twisted. But every time I confronted Emily, she had an answer. She was slick about it, her eyes wide, her voice steady. "You're just stressed from work," she'd tell me. Or, "Jason's your brother, don't make it weird." And for a while, I believed her. I wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that my wife and my own flesh and blood were betraying me, was too painful to accept. By the time fall rolled around, the distance between us was a canyon. She stopped kissing me goodnight. Jason stopped calling me bro as often. Family dinners felt tense. like we were all actors playing roles, hoping the audience didn't notice the cracks in the script. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what hurt men do. We gaslight ourselves before anyone else can. But somewhere deep down, a voice was whispering, "Something's wrong, something you can't unsee once you find it." And that voice kept me awake night after night, staring into the dark, waiting for the moment the truth would finally break through. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing feels out of place until it all comes crashing down. Emily had left for work early, rushing out the door with her travel mug of coffee, her blazer slung over one arm. I stayed behind, working from home, planning to mow the yard later before the Texas heat got unbearable. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. I walked into the living room to grab my laptop, and that's when I saw it. Emily's MacBook, left open on the coffee table. She never did that. Emily was meticulous about shutting it down, locking every screen, as if the world was out to steal her secrets. But today she had slipped. I don't know what possessed me to look. Maybe it was months of suspicion finally boiling over. Maybe it was that voice in my head, the one that had been whispering, "You know something's wrong." Whatever it was, I stepped closer, heart pounding, and glanced at the screen. Her email inbox was open. Right at the top was a message with no subject line. The sender, Jason, my brother. My throat tightened. My hands shook as I clicked it open. There it was, plain as day. A photo of the two of them standing in front of a motel just off I-35. It wasn't an innocent picture, either. His arm was around her waist. Her hand was pressed against his chest. They were smiling in a way I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. The timestamp at the corner of the image made it worse. Last Friday, the exact night she'd told me she was working late on reports. My stomach lurched like I'd swallowed glass. I slammed the laptop shut, stumbled back onto the couch, and just sat there staring at nothing. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was Photoshop. Maybe Jason was playing some sick joke. But deep down, I knew. All those late nights, all those errands, the guarded phone, the inside jokes. It wasn't paranoia. It was the truth staring me right in the face, burning like acid. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there listening to the blood rushing in my ears, feeling my chest tighten with rage. At one point, I realized I'd been gripping my beer bottle from the night before so hard that it shattered in my hand, glass cutting into my palm. I didn't even feel it at first. Pain didn't compare to betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I poured myself whiskey and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, scribbling down every little sign I'd ignored. Grocery trips that didn't add up. Jason helping with house projects. The softball game. The text on her phone. Piece by piece, I laid it all out like evidence in a courtroom. By 3 a.m., the page looked like the notes of a detective on a homicide case. I wasn't sure what to do next. Confront her? Confront him? Smash my fist through Jason's windshield? Instead, I decided I needed proof. Real proof that couldn't be denied. Because Emily was clever. She'd gaslighted me before, convinced me I was paranoid. If I accused her now, she'd twist it, make me look crazy, so I played it cool. The next morning, when she came down in her work clothes, I smiled like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, and I forced myself not to flinch. Inside, though, my heart was screaming. Over the next few days, I started watching her closely, tracking receipts, checking credit card statements. One line item stood out. A hotel charge at a Best Western 2 towns over. She'd told me she was at her friend's baby shower that night. The baby shower was real. I'd seen pictures on Facebook, but the charge proved she hadn't stayed the whole time. I made copies of everything. The email photo, the receipts, the phone records. I stored them in a manila folder and tucked it under the spare tire in my trunk, just in case. I felt like a soldier preparing for war, except the battlefield was my own home. The hardest part was facing Jason. He came over one evening, same as always, acting like nothing was wrong. We were sitting in the driveway, drinking cold beers while the sun dipped low, and I watched him laugh. The same laugh I'd heard since childhood. I wanted to smash the bottle across his face, to scream at him for being a snake, for crawling into the bed of his own brother's wife. But I said nothing. I just stared at him and thought, "You don't know it yet, but your whole world is about to burn." The rage inside me grew like a storm. Nights were sleepless, days were mechanical. I went through the fierce motions at work, pretended to smile at neighbors, all while carrying a hurricane in my chest. And then came the breaking point. Emily slipped again. One night she left her phone on the counter while she showered. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. Her passcode was the same birthday she'd had for years. There, in her messages, were threads with Jason. Explicit, damning, no room for doubt texts. Words I couldn't even repeat out loud. Things no wife should ever say to her brother-in-law. That was it. The last nail in the coffin. I printed everything. Texts, emails, photos, receipts. I built a stack of evidence so heavy it could crush any denial she might throw at me. The stage was set. All I had to do was pick the moment, and I knew exactly when it would be. The family's annual 4th of July barbecue. Everyone would be there. My parents, my cousins, the neighbors. Fireworks, brisket, beer coolers, kids running around with sparklers. The perfect stage for truth to explode like a firecracker in the night sky. I'd let them have their secret for long enough. Now it was time to drag it into the light. The 4th of July had always been my favorite holiday. Something about the smell of smoke in the air, the crack of fireworks, and the red, white, and blue bunting draped across every porch felt like home. It was a day when my family came together, coolers of beer on the driveway, ribs smoking on the grill, kids tearing through the yard with sparklers like they were chasing fireflies. But that year, I didn't see freedom in the sky. I saw my chance. I spent the whole morning pretending everything was normal. Emily was buzzing around the kitchen, slicing watermelon and marinating chicken wings, smiling as if she hadn't gutted me from the inside out. Jason arrived early, as he always did, carrying a six-pack and cracking jokes with my dad. I shook his hand like nothing was wrong, though every bone in me screamed to snap his wrist. The evidence was tucked neatly in my backpack. Printed photos, receipts, and those sickening text messages. My arsenal. By late afternoon, the yard was packed with family. My mom set out bowls of potato salad, my cousins were arguing over cornhole, and country music poured from the outdoor speakers. It was the perfect innocent chaos of an American summer. And right there in the middle of it stood Emily, laughing with my brother, their shoulders brushing just a little too close. I waited. Timing was everything. When the sun dipped low and everyone gathered around the long picnic table for dinner, I stood up. The grill hissed behind me, the air heavy with mesquite smoke, and I cleared my throat. Before we eat, I've got something to share. All eyes turned to me, my parents, my cousins, my kids. Even the neighbors quieted down. I pulled the manila folder from my bag and laid it on the table with a slap. I want everyone to see what kind of people we're dealing with here. Emily's face drained of color. Jason froze, a rib bone half raised to his mouth. I slid out the first photo, Emily and Jason outside the motel, timestamp blazing at the corner. Gasps rippled around the table. My mom covered her mouth. My dad muttered something under his breath I'd never heard him say before. Maybe you think that's just a one-off, I said, voice steady, though my hands shook. So, here's the hotel receipt. I laid it down. Here's the text messages. Another sheet. Here's the email. One by one, I stacked the evidence like cards in a game they had already lost. Emily stammered, "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I barked, cutting her off. "You called him the only man who makes you feel alive. That's my brother, Emily. My blood. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I'm stupid?" Jason finally found his voice. "Bro, let's not do this here." "Oh, we're doing this here," I snapped, slamming my fist on the table so hard the plates rattled. "We're doing this in front of everyone, because you didn't care about hiding it when you snuck around. You didn't care about me or the kids or this family, so now you get to live in the light." And the silence was suffocating. My kids looked confused, too young to understand but old enough to sense disaster. My mom was crying. My dad's face was red with fury, veins bulging in his neck. My cousins exchanged stunned glances, whispering like it was some soap opera unfolding in real time. Emily's eyes darted around, desperate for an escape. Jason looked like a cornered animal, sweat beading on his forehead. I stood tall, the July heat burning into my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth was no longer my burden alone. It was theirs to carry now. Emily tried again. "We can explain." "Don't bother," I said. My voice was calm now, almost cold. "I've heard enough lies. You two thought you could hide this forever. You thought you were smarter than me, but you slipped, and now the whole family knows exactly what you are." And with that, I gathered the papers, stuffed them back in the folder, and slung my backpack over my shoulder. Nobody stopped me. I walked out of that backyard while fireworks began to pop in the distance, little bursts of red and gold lighting up the evening sky. Behind me, the voices rose, shouting, crying, gasps of disbelief, but I didn't turn around. I got in my truck, slammed the door, and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I started the engine and drove away, leaving them to choke on their shame. That night, I didn't watch the fireworks. I didn't need to. I'd set off an explosion big enough to shatter my world and theirs. And for the first time in a long time, I slept. Not peacefully, not yet. But with the weight of secrecy lifted off my chest, I finally closed my eyes knowing the truth was out. What I didn't know then was just how far the fallout would spread, through our family, our friends, even the neighborhood. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a scandal, a wildfire I had lit by dragging their sins into the open. And in the weeks that followed, it would consume everything in its path. The Monday after the barbecue felt like waking up in a different country, where the street names were the same, but the air carried a new gravity. I walked into work with a travel mug, and the kind of exhausted calm you see in guys who've been through a hurricane, and are now just sweeping glass off the porch. My phone was lighting up. Missed calls from my parents, a text from my aunt that was basically a novel, and 3 messages from neighbors who hated to intrude, but needed me to know they were praying for me. Dallas runs on 2 things: air conditioning and gossip. The 4th had provided fireworks for both. I didn't answer anyone. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer. Not the billboard guy who winks from I-75, but the kind of lawyer whose office has soft lamps, framed diplomas, and a receptionist who looks like she can smell a lie before it crosses the threshold. I slid the manila folder onto her desk and said, "I want out. Clean and fast." She paged through the evidence without flinching. Photo, receipts, text transcripts. "Texas is a no-fault state," she said, "but documentation helps frame the negotiations." That was the word she used for what came next. Negotiations, like we'd be haggling over a used lawnmower. She started a list: house, cars, retirement accounts, custody schedule. I signed retainer papers that read like an affidavit of my own rebirth. When I left the office, the sky had that glaring, merciless Texas blue, and for the first time since the slip that shattered everything, I inhaled without my ribs fighting back. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was permission. Permission to begin. Emily called that night. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through tight, clipped, managerial. "We need to talk about the kids and the mortgage. And we can explain this to your parents if you just..." She didn't finish the sentence. I listened twice, noting how she said "we" like we were still a team. Betrayal has a grammar all its own. Every sentence bends around the speaker's favorite delusion. Jason texted, "Bro, I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." I blocked him. The sentence didn't require an ending. It had collapsed under its own cowardice. Days found their rhythm. I moved into a furnished month-to-month apartment 10 minutes away so I could be close to the kids. The place had that corporate temporary feel: gray sofa, abstract art, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. I brought 2 things that were mine: a coffee maker and my daughter's crayon drawing of us at the ballpark. I taped the drawing to the fridge with blue painter's tape, like it was a declaration of independence. The kids handled the split with the brutal honesty only children possess. My son asked if he could keep his PlayStation at my place, so it's easier. My daughter cried in hiccups, then demanded pancakes. I told them the truth, measured for their age. Mom and Dad were going to live in different houses, and it wasn't their fault, and we both loved them more than anything. Kids are lie detectors with legs. They studied my face like TSA agents, and, finding no contraband, returned to cartoons. The neighborhood scandal cycle churned. On Facebook, a mom from the next cul-de-sac posted a vaguely spiritual quote about hidden things coming to light, which in suburban code translates to, "You'll never believe what happened to the family on the corner lot." My brother stopped showing up to family dinners. Emily alternated between icy professionalism and teary apologies that felt staged, like she was auditioning for a role she'd already lost. During the first mediation session, she arrived in a blazer, hair perfect, notes color-tabbed like she was presenting to the board. I sat across from her in a denim shirt and said little. Our lawyers did the talking, trading percentages and calendar grids. At one point she looked at me and said, "Do you really have to drag Jason into this?" the use of his name like a china plate sliding off a table. I answered carefully. I didn't drag anyone. Y'all walked. The mediator wrote something down. Probably, client has acquired a spine. Odd things became symbols. The garage remote, for instance. She wanted the one with the smoother spring. You can keep it, I said, and saw a flash of confusion in her eyes, as if she'd been gearing up for a fight that never arrived. Revenge stories on Reddit always end with a mic drop, a confetti cannon of gotchas. Mine was smaller, quieter. Not a hammer, but a refusal. No more battles on their schedule, no more oxygen for their fire. In the second week of apartment life, I started running at White Rock Lake before sunrise. The path had its own society. Nurses coming off night shifts, a guy who ran in long sleeves no matter the weather, a woman who always said morning like a benediction. Sweat became the answer key to questions that had no words. I shed 10 pounds and an old version of myself that had tried too hard to be a pleasant man. Nights belonged to rebuilding. I learned to cook more than brisket, chicken piccata, roasted carrots, a decent jambalaya. I fixed things, leaky sink, loose doorknob, because making a broken thing whole again felt like a prayer I could say with my hands. When the kids stayed over, we made pillow forts and watched movies that smelled like butter. On the nights they were with their mother, I sat on the balcony with a book and the cicadas' electric hum and let silence stitch me shut. Meanwhile, the fallout worked its way through the family like a slow-moving storm. My parents tried diplomacy, but blood knows its own weather. Mom called me crying, not because she didn't love me, but because motherhood is 1,000 tiny funerals for things that shouldn't have died. Dad didn't say much at all, just asked if I needed help moving a dresser and then lifted half the apartment like it weighed nothing. At one point, he tightened a socket with unnecessary force and muttered, "Your brother's an idiot." That was all the absolution I needed. News arrived in tidbits. Jason lost a contract after rumors reached the property manager whose sister was at our barbecue. Dallas is a small town wearing a big city's hat. Emily's boss encouraged her to take some personal time. The two of them sporadically tried to make a public go of it, showing up together at a taco place once, where a friend saw them argue over salsa like it was a custody hearing. Maybe that's what they wanted, some outlaw romance, scandal lit by neon. But even their rebellion looked secondhand, a knockoff of the thing they broke to get here. There was a moment in all of this when the story tilted, when reality developed a faint gleam around the edges. Maybe it was sleep deprivation, or the way grief drags you through myth until your shoes catch on the old roots. But I swear the universe started to feel like it had a sense of humor. The apartment complex had a communal laundry room with a bulletin board where people posted things, lost cats, guitar lessons, a flyer for a book club that only read crime novels from the 80s. One night, I found a single playing card pinned there, the Joker, grinning like he knew where everybody had been last Friday. 2 days later, I opened my mailbox to a glossy coupon packet, and the top offer read, "Free motel coffee. Ask about our loyalty rate." I laughed out loud, alone in a parking lot, while a moth performed interpretive dance around the lamp. The world was speaking in winks. Maybe it always had. I'd just never been listening. Therapy helped translate. The counselor's office smelled like cedar and tea. She had a sand tray in the corner and a bookshelf that sagged under titles about boundaries. She asked me to name what I wanted. I said, to stop narrating their story. She smiled like I'd unlocked a level. "Good," she said. "Then tell me yours." So I did. I talked about fear and manhood and the peculiar American expectation that stoicism is holiness. I talked about anger, not as a bonfire to warm your hands over forever, but as a flare you shoot into the night so the rescue plane knows where to land. Final mediation came on a rainy Friday. We divided the life we had built like a family heirloom nobody wanted to keep whole. We signed papers that turned married into formerly, husband into father, without. Emily wiped her eyes. I handed her a tissue. On my way out, the receptionist said, "Good luck," with that mix of kindness and bureaucracy you only hear in law offices and hospitals. I stepped into the wet parking lot and felt lighter by the pound. A week later, I hosted our kids for a Saturday that felt like a rehearsal for a better life. We grocery shopped with a list my daughter wrote in purple marker. We visited my parents and watched my dad teach my son how to replace a headlight. On the drive home, we stopped for snow cones from a trailer where the guy calls everyone Chief. My daughter leaned her sticky head on my shoulder and said, "This is a good day." The sentence landed like a benediction. That night, after the kids fell asleep in the fort they'd constructed with every blanket I owned, I sat on the balcony and let my mind run the tape from the beginning. The flags on porches, the guarded phone, the motel photo, the table slap at the barbecue. It played like one of those infidelity stories you doom scroll on a Sunday. Revenge stories, karma compilations, Reddit threads where strangers vote NTA like they're tossing roses on stage. Except this was my life. My ending wasn't a viral sting. It was quieter, messier, better. If there's any conspiracy at work in the universe, it's this. The secret code for winning is not revenge, but release. You let go, and the architecture you thought held you up turns out to be the cage that kept you small. The moment you step outside, the door vanishes like smoke. I won't say I forgave them. Forgiveness is a cathedral you don't sprint through. You sit on the steps and watch the light change. But I chose something truer than fury. I chose peace that looked like early runs and pancakes and a drawing on my fridge. I chose the slow, unfancy work of a new life. Sometimes, on my way to pick up the kids, I catch my reflection in a storefront window and barely recognize the man. He stands a little taller, he buys decent coffee. His phone isn't a lie factory. He knows the names of his neighbor's dogs. He keeps a folder in his trunk, not because he needs evidence anymore, but because it reminds him he survived the kind of betrayal that rewrites a man. And he authored the last chapter himself. Emily and Jason, they became a story other people tell when the grill smoke thins and the cooler lid thunks shut, a cautionary tale with too many receipts. If Karma is a screenwriter, she gave them a second-rate script, the romance nobody believes, the promotion that never materializes, the table at the taco joint where the salsa always tastes a little off. As for me, I tuck my kids into sleep, wash the dishes, step onto the balcony, and lift my eyes to a Dallas night that hums like a well-tuned engine. Somewhere far off, you can still hear fireworks if you listen. The cheap kind someone saved for later, sputtering into the dark. I don't chase them. I've had enough explosions for one life. Peace over revenge. That's the ending. Not loud, not flashy, just honest. And finally, blessedly, mine.